I agree with you. I think you do learn how to read in college, but that for me, what that means is you sort of learn how to socialize with dead people. Because that's sort of what reading is. It's like, it's to learn that reading is that reading is a form of interaction, that you can interact with people who've been dead for a long time. It's just hard to do. And that's what the reading experience is. The reading experience isn't passing your eyes over something and then writing a paper about it. That there's a form of socializing, which is a form of intellectual life that's possible in that context. And for me, that was like a radical discovery.
So I've never read much Aristotle. I guess the answer might be none. And I haven't read a lot of Plato. I've read a little bit of Plato. Shame on me. But if I were a student in your class, well, let me say it first. If I picked up those works and I started to read them, I'd struggle. And I could socialize a little bit with dead people, but not so much. How do you see your role as a teacher in facilitating that conversation between students and those who are long gone?
Yeah, so I think that really is my job as a teacher. I agree with you. It's very hard to do on one's own. And people often ask me, like, what should I start with in Plato or Aristotle? What should I read? And I'm like, the first thing you should do is find a group of people to read it with. That's step one. And read whatever they want to read. That's not quite, I then would have views about, I think you should start with Plato rather than Aristotle. I think you should start with certain dialogues rather than others. Aristotle is very hard because he's so boring to read. And there's no getting around that. And that's really different from Plato, who's really not boring to read. And so the nice thing about Plato is you can sort of get into it without really getting anywhere close to the bottom of it. You can sort of stay on the surface of it and get something. You know, is Socrates being a jerk here, or does he have a point against Euthyphro? Is Euthyphro a conservative or a radical? So you have these conversations about like these people, there are people who are talking to each other, who are arguing with each other. And I think what you have to do is get the students to be invested. You know, that thing, skin in the game. You sort of get them invested in this argument. Whose side are you on? Who do you agree with? What would you say if he said this to you? And it's incredibly easy to do that with Platonic dialogue. Students do it almost without trying. They actually read the dialogue and they just assume that their job is to figure out which side that they're on. Right? So you don't even have to persuade them to do it. And then you just have to get them to see that they can just keep doing the thing that was in the dialogue is something they can do too. Right? And that it becomes an extension. The classroom very easily becomes an extension of what's happening in the text. That's much harder if you're reading Aristotle. It's harder if you're reading Descartes or Kant. It's quite hard if you're reading Nietzsche, right? But you can do it. That's what you have to do with all of them. It's just easiest to do with Plato.